One of the most interesting teams over the next month will be the Arizona Diamondbacks. They have a lot of walk-year interesting players that they could trade, yet they're on the brink of maybe being in the playoff race. They could go one way or the other. We'll ask a lot about that, John, because our guest is Mike Hazen, who runs baseball operations for Arizona.
Yeah, great timing. This is a team that everybody's got their eye on for sure. They have a lot of great veteran players who had a big value at the trade deadline. And it's great to have Mike on. He's been on several times, and he's a very smart and candid guy. I know all the other GMs, they're all smart, but here you should, the ones who aren't candid should watch and see that you can be honest without giving away the store. And he's able to do that. So it's great that you got him, and really looking forward to it.
John, your five most dishonest baseball executives, alphabetical order. Go.
Well, I mean, yeah, Bob
Uh,
Quinn, he's number
yes.
one.
Yes. He was my number
Sorry,
one back in the day. Anyway, we'll talk to Mike
I don't
about.
have five. I'll get back to you next week with the five. But
Yes, we'll do that as a segment next week. But this week, we'll obviously ask Mike Hazen about the trade deadline, about Corbin Carroll, about some problems with high-priced pitchers that he's had, and a lot more. John and I will talk about the Mets slide, the Yankees offensive meh, and we'll do some mid-season award stuff. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John, this season really took a U-turn for both New York teams, but the Mets in particular on beginning June 13th. John, I'm writing about this for our Plus column tomorrow morning in the New York Post. I went to the ballpark on June 12th, which was a day game against the Nationals. And you know me, John, I try to go with an idea or two just in case something doesn't happen in the game. You try to execute it beforehand. And that was a point where Blackburn had returned to the rotation, pitched well. They had six starters going well. Manaea was pretty close to coming back. Montas right behind him. And my thing was, how are they going to turn eight starters into five? And then I got told by a couple of people who I called about this that Blackburn was actually available if they wanted. And we posted a column in about a news story in about the fourth inning of that game. In the sixth inning, Kodai Senga covering first base blew out his hamstring. So that story lasted as relevant for about 25 minutes, 30 minutes. And the Mets pitching in particular, nothing has worked for the last 2+ weeks. But the pitching in particular, John, has gone bad. Injuries, Canning, McGill, Senga, setback for Manaea. And the guys who have pitched have not pitched well from the starters and then overburning the bullpens with short starts. The game we play, me and you at the MLB Network with Brian Kenny, concern, panic, or doom. Why don't I ask, what's your level of Mets now as we begin the month where they have to decide what are they doing at the deadline?
well, we're certainly concerned. I think we're bordering on panic at this point. You mentioned June 13th. I do want to point out that was Friday the 13th,
13th, yeah.
but that's not the reason they went south, nor is it the fact that they honored Pride Day, which I'm getting all sorts of tweets about, that they put up a flag of a pride flag instead of the American flag. It's not that. It's not that I want to walk. I went for a walk with Frank. Uh, Frank walks. Frank the Tank. It's none of that. They've regressed. You could say they regressed to the mean. They regressed to what's normal. But it isn't normal to be the best team in baseball with a 45-24 record, and since then be the worst with 3-13. Is it possible? Yeah. I mean, look, in 2017, the Dodgers were something like 90-30 something, and they lost 16 out of 17. And the Yankees were terrible at the end of 2000. Both teams made the World Series. It is a long season, as they say. That's baseball, Susan. Stuff happens. But it is worrisome when you're talking about the pitching staff and the way they've been decimated by injury and then a turn in performance. I mean, Peterson was all-star worthy up until his last two starts. Unfortunately, the injuries, McGill, Canning, Senga, and you mentioned Manaea was close to coming back when you wrote that story. He's still close to coming back,
Yeah,
right? Still
yeah.
close. I mean, it's been quite eye-opening and pretty shocking. Steve Cohen said it on Twitter, right? He never expected this. I really don't think anybody expected it, although people on Twitter are telling me they expected it. Those are
Yeah.
mostly Yankee fans, I think.
Those are super geniuses. Just to put a finer point on it, right, is through the games of June 12th, they were first in total ERA, first in starter ERA, and second in relief ERA, all 289 or less. In the 16 games since, their last 641 in total ERA, last in starter ERA 622, and 29 659 in reliever ERA. I mean, it has been a universal problem, caused by injury, caused, you mentioned Peterson. Blackburn, after one good spot start against the Dodgers, hasn't been good since then. Montas, one good, one bad. The one guy who's kind of going good is Holmes, and he's already 15 innings beyond whatever he's thrown in his life. So you got to keep an eye on him. As to your point, Manaea is still sitting out there now with loose bodies in his elbow. And I think the cascade into their bullpen is like we've seen Brazaban take a big step back, Reed Garrett take a big step back. They kind of are desperate to win, so you want to use your best relievers. On the other hand, we're in this situation. So it leads to me, John, obviously say whatever you want about what I just offered, but do you think that I know the trade deadline doesn't really start until after the draft, which is the 14th and the 13th and the 14th of July. There's at least six starters, six sellers, maybe seven if you count the Orioles. Does David Stearns have to get pushy, aggressive, creative, and just say, I got to find some arms
He's
now?
not.
Otherwise, in the next 2 weeks, things could get bleak.
He's not the pushy type. I don't see that from him. He's not giving up the big time prospects for a short term solution. That isn't him. I guess we shouldn't be shocked about the bullpen. The starters, while performing fantastically, did not go long, even when they were doing well. And they were forced to use all their good relievers, Stanek and Garrett and Brazaban, a lot, and they all look a little bit worn down. They have some replacements available, right? Budo, Nunez, a couple guys. Diaz has been really good all along. It's basically been Diaz and Soto carrying the team, and you can't win with two guys, one being the closer carrying your team. Um, I just don't see it happening. I think what we see and what they'll do is that rotation of lefty relievers that they've been throwing out there. They might have now a rotation of regular relievers or other starters that they throw in there. Yeah, we wouldn't have thought that they'd be at a deficit of starters because they did have very good depth in the rotation at one point. It is not the case now, and it is quite worrisome. But at some point, I don't think it's going to be soon because I don't see him. He's not the overpaying type. They're still in playoff position. As bad as they've been lately, they're still in playoff position. So I said bordering on panic. I don't think David Stearns is the panicking type. I don't think he's panicking, and he's going to keep trying different players out. I mean, it hasn't worked with the lefty reliever. I don't know if it'll ever work. They've had Boucher, they've had Lovelady, they've had Castillo. Lovelady is back now for the second time. I don't know if that's ever going to work, but I don't think he's going to panic. They're not panicking in the front office. We're panicking, or at least I am. But I don't see that happening.
They got Brooks Raley beginning a rehab assignment, so maybe he helps with the lefty at some point. John, I think you said it well, which is two and a half weeks ago, they had quantity and quality, the two things you'd want most of out of your pitching. And today it feels like they have neither. And the question is that a blip that to some degree, if Manaea and Senga come back soon, maybe Raley does help their bullpen, etc., does it get better? Let's flip over to the other side of town. The Yankees have been not great either since that same day. Now, they did win 2 out of 3 over the weekend, and the biggest problem had been their offense. Kind of as Aaron Judge goes, the Yankees go. He slumped a little. They slumped. He hit 2 homers yesterday when we're speaking. They scored a bunch of runs. Can I give you my unbelievable statistic from them, which kind of, I think, leads into, I'm always critical about how they play baseball. They're not the greatest fun to, they're better this year because they added 2 guys in Goldschmidt and Bellinger who are actually really good at baseball. They do things well. They have lost all these. They have the worst record. I think they're 1-6 in extra innings. And what's in extra innings? It's runner on second, no out. You got to get the runner over, right? Like to do this. Do you know the Yankees have come to the plate this year 62 times with a runner on second and none out? It's 50 at bats. They have no extra base hits or RBIs in that situation. They have no extra base hits or RBIs. They do not have an RBI this year. They're 8 for
Well,
50. They have 8 singles in 50 at bats with a runner on second and no out. By the way, can you imagine not scoring on a single one of those? Like, what is your base running like? I understand you want to be cautious. You don't want to make the first out at home plate,
yeah.
but they've scored on none of them. Yesterday, John, Trent Grisham is on second base. Cody Bellinger hits a line drive to right field where Lawrence Butler is running towards the line. He catches it. Grisham gets caught in no man's land and can't tag up. Like he doesn't go from second to third. They don't move runners over. They don't score them. And I do think at the end, if they don't get better at these things, when you're playing for everything, you just can't wait for a 3-run homer and Aaron Judge to save you.
Yeah, well, you've been saying this for more than a year. I obviously came home to roost in the World Series. I had a scout tell me, and I wrote about it for my Friday column, that they're poor still fundamentally. He praised the Mets. He hasn't helped the Mets. They haven't won since then, but he said that the Mets were much better fundamentally. And that's shocking to me. You can't score from second on a single. You need an extra base hit to score from second. Apparently you do. And they have some fast guys, right? Volpe and Chisholm have good speed. I know Chisholm thinks he's the fastest guy in baseball, but he has good speed, and they should be able to score from second on a single occasionally. I think in terms of their offense, it's regressed to what we expect. I mean, their offense has been terrible for a couple weeks now, and overall, it's been very good. It's not the number one offense it was, just as the Mets pitching was number one. It came back to the pack a little bit, and they have a team that's dependent on home runs, and I think their offense overall, despite the fundamental flaws, is generally very good because they have Aaron Judge, and I think Stanton will be chipping in at some point. They got some good names, right? Goldschmidt is a good offensive player. Chisholm is a good offensive player. Rice has power. So I think their offense is not going to be their problem ultimately, and they're in better shape because they got 3 starters going very well. One is a Cy Young candidate, Rodon is probably an All-Star candidate, and Schmidt certainly has taken a step forward as well. So at the moment, they're in better shape. We go back and forth with this. At
Yeah.
one week it's the Yankees are in better shape. One week it's the Mets. This week it's pretty obvious who's in better shape.
Yeah, and look, Will Warren has pitched pretty well for them for about the last 5, 6 weeks, and who knows what it means. Marcus Stroman had a very good start off the IL. So did Frankie Montas, and the second start looked terrible. So we'll need to see more. John, let's just buzz through this quick because for Sunday's paper, for Sunday's New York Post, we passed the 81 game mark, which is half the schedule. I did the awards. I'll give you who I had as my winners for the 2 main awards. I had Judge and Pete Crow Armstrong for MVP, and I had Hunter Brown and Paul Skeens for Cy Young. I think if I did it today off of this last Scooble start,
No, you
and
can't change. You can't change.
I,
No, go
I
ahead.
well, I was through 81 games.
I
I had
got it. It's all
Hunter
right.
Brown. I did say in the piece that I think Scooble's the best starter in the league, and
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if he won again. There's Freed, Crochet. That's probably the most interesting race, though. I think Scooble's so much better than everybody else that he's ultimately probably going to win it. Go ahead, go wherever you want with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Schoolball's not an overwhelming favorite, but it's basically flip a coin. He's like 50% according to the odds at this point, and I get it. He's the best pitcher in baseball, and I would like to say by far, but statistically at this point, although he has a 10-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, so I mean, my pick is Skubal, but Brown, Freed, DeGrom, and Crochet have all been excellent. So that might be the best race. That seems to be the most interesting race. NL Cy Young, I think the winner hasn't really come forward yet. There isn't anybody doing that great, right? You had Skeens and you likened it to DeGrom when he won when he was 10-9. He's been very, very good. Obviously, he's a phenom. I would probably go with Wheeler at this moment, but I could see Skeens. That's kind of a coin flip. You know what? The American League is now a race, right? Raleigh's been amazing. I would simply give it to Judge right now because they're in clear playoff position. I mean, you call it a cop out if you like, but I mean, MVP is most valuable, right? Sorry to not pick Raleigh because their team has not been very good, but he's been great. I mean, to be on pace for 60 home runs when you're a catcher, incredible. Judge is having his usual all-time great season, so To me, Judge, with the Yankees in first place, I give it to Judge. I still think Ohtani in the National League, but I get it. I mean, Pete Crow Armstrong probably has a better WAR. He's very good defensively. He's stolen more bases than Ohtani, but I mean, Ohtani's still Ohtani. He's still the best hitter in the National League. He still leads in slugging. I looked at some of the other stats. He's ahead in win probability added by a lot. So I mean, Pete Crow Armstrong's a fine choice. I'm still going to go with Ohtani. Alonso was in the middle of it until recently, and obviously all the Mets have fallen back except for Soto and Diaz, as we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and I'll say this to close segment. With Otani pitching now, I think I made reference. I assume he'll win this again, because he'll combine both things, and that will probably be
Well, is
enough.
he just an opener? I mean, if he's
Yeah,
just an opener, I don't know
it's
if
still
that's
pretty
good.
impressive since
It's
nobody else.
impressive. It's impressive, but I'm still going by the impact.
Yeah,
Who's got the biggest impact? If he's pitching and he pitched like in Anaheim, where he had a 2.84 ERA over a 3-year period, and he's starting games and pitching 5 or 6 innings and doing this as far as the bat, you can't. There's no competition. But if he's just an opener, I'm still considering Pete Crow Armstrong and whoever else you might Tucker, whoever else you might think is a potential Schwarber. He's been really good as
Trey
well.
Turner has had a good first
Right,
half. A
right,
bunch of people. I mean, John, and I'll just say this to close is like you mentioned Raleigh, and I think we don't have total peace with how tough it is to catch and do what he's doing offensively.
right.
And he's not just catching; he's a very, very good catcher. Besides that, but it feels a little to me like the AL MVP last year. I think Bobby Witt's season last year wins like 8 or 9 out of 10 years. But Judge was historic. Judge is historic again this year. He has numbers like slugging numbers, OPS numbers, etc., batting average, combine it all. That just like it's not often in history that you see what he's doing. And I think is I think Raleigh wins in most years. If this is who Judge is going to be to the finish line, I would assume it's going to be second place for him. Look, one of the players who was high up in the National League before he got hurt was Corbin Carroll. He's out now with a fractured wrist. It's among the many problems the Diamondbacks are dealing with as they decide if they're buyers or sellers between now and July 31st. Their head of baseball operations is Mike Hazen. He'll join us next on the show to talk about all of it. John and I are really pleased to be joined by Mike Hazen, who's run baseball operations for the Diamondbacks for the last 9 seasons. Of course, got his team to the World Series a couple of years ago. Mike, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Glad to be here, guys.
Mike, there's just an obvious place this time of year to start. You had a rough weekend against the Marlins. You got swept. I think you've lost 4 in a row at this point. You're a game under 500. You're 5 back of the last wild card. I think you're one of the teams we thought would definitely be fully in this at this time of year and probably a full-on buyer for the July 31st trade deadline. And yet we're seeing you probably teeter between the two worlds. I wonder if you could take us through life in this world. And do you kind of have a date in your head? Like, we have to be X by X for me to know fully what I'm doing about July 31st.
Yeah, I wish I could give you a very concrete answer to that question. It's not the situation we'd kind of hoped to be in, obviously, with the moves we made this offseason and kind of pushing all into this team coming into the season. Yeah, we're in a little bit of a tough spot right now, given what you've mentioned. The competitiveness in the National League has ratcheted up this season. It's been going that direction. I think it's even more competitive now. There's a good and a bad with that. I think we just saw the Marlins play. They have much improved. They got a lot of talent on their roster. They're a very dangerous team the way they play. So I think that's probably good for us moving forward in the competitiveness within the National League, for us to give ourselves a chance to get back in this thing. We have to play better. We haven't played very good baseball, and that's been largely problematic for us. I mean, we're into being ahead in almost every one of our games, and it's been hard for us to sort of close those things down. So I think where I stand now is the same message that I've given. I want this team to put us in a position to buy. I want this team to put us in a position to be right beneath, where we need to be. We don't have to be all the way back in it or ahead. We just need to be within a distance that we feel like we're being responsible in adding to this team. Our goal coming into the season was to compete and go to the playoffs. And through the halfway point, we haven't put ourselves in a great spot. But we're going to continue to go out there and fight and play, and we'll see what happens over these next 2 weeks. I think we have a pretty rough schedule moving forward, but also multiple division series coming up, which is always good because we'll go into direct competition, and we'll see where we're standing at the end of it. We were in a very similar position last year. We ended up winning 89 games right around this time. So, and in 2023, we ended up being 4 games under 500 after the All-Star, after the trading deadline. And so, you don't know what's going to happen during the course of a season. But I do think we need to start playing better baseball, more consistent baseball on a nightly basis for us to kind of push in the way we want to push in.
You mentioned it, Mike. You went for it the last couple of years. 2 years ago, with 84 wins, you made it all the way to the World Series. Last year, 89 wins. Didn't quite make it, tied with the Braves and the Mets, and the tiebreaker was not kind to you. So every win counts. You know that. So how badly do you want to buy? I mean, what would it take to actually? I mean, a lot of people are looking at your team because you got a lot of really good free agents, but how bad do you want to be a buyer, and what exactly would it take, since you didn't sell being under 500 the last couple of years?
Yeah, they're not just looking, they're calling. They're calling. They're calling and asking me. Just so you know, that the looking part has stopped. They're stopped window shopping, and they're now making direct inquiries. I want to buy really bad, honestly, but we have a responsibility to the organization too, that I can't just blindly go in there and hope. I think that's the most dangerous word this time of year. I'd love to be able to just hope that everything's going to work itself out. I want to see us play more consistent baseball before I'll start to hope that those runs of wins are coming. We've been just so up and down this year. It's hard for me to really pin down exactly. I think we have a talented team. I think this team is capable of playing better. I think this team needs to, I've said this before, and I'm not skirting blame for this. I'll ultimately take the responsibility for whatever decision we make, but I want the team to put us in this specific position, and they have to kind of go do that. We've talked about that internally, that the team needs to put us in a position to go do those things. But what I want to have, what I know Torey wants, what I know the team wants, yeah, everybody, this is a good team that has a good group, and they work hard together and they play hard together. We need to start ticking off some wins here, though. And yeah, the calendar is not going to be kind to us here for the next 30 days. We're going to have to make some decisions.
Mike, you kind of got to what the other question I wanted to ask about the trade deadline. Just to put a finer point on it. You got two offensive players most teams would be looking for you in Suarez and Josh Naylor. You got two starting pitchers in Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly. These are all walk-year players, and Jalen Beeks and Shelby Miller in your bullpen. So it's all walk-year guys who have pretty high level of desirability as you do it. You mentioned calls. Are they calls to say, hey, if you, or are they going further at this point and trying to tempt you to jump the way they want you to jump?
Yeah, it's still if you, I think, for the most part, and that's fair. Like I know sometimes I've been in this situation on the other side, with a team like where we are in the middle. Sometimes you feel bad, like it's insulting to call and presume that somebody may sell or be in a certain situation. So I get that. I actually appreciate the phone calls. The dialogue is very helpful. But that's where it is right now. But again, we're playing 17 games in a row, so I think this next 2 weeks we're gonna have a decent understanding of where we sit in the world. And you're seeing teams like Milwaukee and Cincinnati and St. Louis, outside of the presumed playoff team, and San Francisco for sure, outside the presumed playoff teams, which were going to be San Diego and Philly and the Mets and the Braves, like, you're seeing that wide swath of talented, really good teams in the National League. And we're just going to have to be realistic about how we handle these conversations moving forward. But, for the most part, nobody's really thrown. You've mentioned the players. There'd be no surprise as to who everybody's coming after. It's fairly straightforward. We'll talking about controllable players probably gets into a little deeper conversation that we really haven't had yet. I think most of the initial phone calls are like on the players that would be expiring, but it like I said, I want to go into tonight's baseball game. I want to be in an impossible situation to make a very difficult decision, Because if we have that decision, then that's the position I want to be in 30 days from now.
Just to underline that, I think you guys were both clear in your enunciation, but you said if you, not the two letters that sound like if you, right? So I just want to make that clear. For your potential sale, at this point we understand you could go either way. Teams are looking at your team because you have all of these great free agents who are, particularly some of them are having great years. Do you look at that and see that you are the top potential seller, and in this seller's market, you could get a haul back? I mean, I guess it's not very tempting because you want to go for it. You've gone for it in the past. You've done well going for it, but uh, that's the reality, isn't it? That you could get a haul for these guys.
Yeah, that's the reality of it. We're fortunate that our players are playing the way they are, and appreciate that. We're also, in a position where those players are on our team, and they help make the engine go. And I don't really think about. I'm going to have to think about the long-term implications of these decisions for sure. That's our job. It's our responsibility. I haven't really tried not to spend as much time on that right now. But we will ask ourselves those questions about what it might look like. And yes, I think the fact that most of these guys, well, all the guys that we had specifically discussed that Joel mentioned, are all going to be free agents at the end of the year. That is certainly attractive this time of year for our club and others. Is that getting guys for the rest of the season is usually the guys that we target come trade deadline time. So we're not blind to that, and we are very much aware of the seasons they're having. We're appreciative of that, and yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Mike, there's no singular reason why you're kind of in the teeter position, but like of the players I mentioned, the one guy who we kind of is far off of what we normally expect from him is Zach Gallen. Right? He's a guy who constantly has been in play for Cy Young, top of your rotation. As we speak, he's got the worst ERA in the major leagues for a qualified starter. What's going on with Zach Gallen, and what do you expect to see the rest of the way?
Yeah, Zach's had a rough first half, and he's had some amazing games, and there's been some inconsistency there. I don't really as dramatic or that as like framing it with the ERA for qualified stars. I get that is what it is. I'm not sure that we're that far off from something clicking. I mean, he's healthy. His stuff is the same. I think the mix is something that we're on top of. There may be subtle delivery things that he's working on. And look, sometimes guys have rough stretches, and regardless of where they are in their career or where they are on the food chain from a talent standpoint, and it happens. And it's our job to help get him to a position to be the best he can be. I think if age or things are declining or injury is a concern, that's a certain bucket that you talk about, but that's not the case in any of these places. Like, he's at the top of his game, he's in the prime of his career, and his stuff is good. So, and he's one of the most prepared pitchers I have. So he's going to figure this out. And it is frustrating to watch. He's frustrated, I'm sure, but he's going to figure this out. I would expect a very strong second half out of him if I were betting on it.
To change the subject slightly from the trade standpoint, your team obviously is under 500 now. Nobody expected that. I thought you were a surefire playoff team. I don't think I'm alone. Torey Lovullo, your manager, came out and was pretty outspoken recently, commenting on how disappointed he was. I know injuries are a big part of it. Corbin Burns, your biggest signing, is out, and when he looked great, he was looking fantastic, and he's now out. Corbin Carroll, your best player, is out at this point. What, if you want to put your finger on it, what would you say it is? And Torey has been a terrific manager for you guys. And just to say, I mean, he's not part of this problem, is he?
No, he's not part of the problem. Injuries are not an excuse. Everybody has injuries. We have taken on our fair share of them. Yes, it doesn't help. I would say that the more challenging part is we've taken on some injuries in the second line of guys, even more so than the top line guys. Like but that's my job, right? My job is to prepare the team and to make sure that the team is protected against these types of injuries. And I haven't done a good enough job to protect this team against these types of injuries to the extent that we've had them. Look, we haven't thrown the ball very well. And defensively, we haven't played great defense. It's the frustrating part is it's something that's so fundamentally important to the both of us, Tori and I, and we just haven't gone out and done that. And our offense has been clicking for the majority of the year. I mean, there's a number of games that we've come back in that we can score mountains of runs at times, and it's a credit to the position players that keep going out there and battling even when we get down at certain points of times. But we have to solidify that side of the ball. The run prevention for us has to improve. And there's no secret about that. You know, we're the picking up the baseball, making the plays across the diamond, and then the pitchers challenging hitters and putting them behind in the count are probably the two biggest things that we need to improve upon. And probably the biggest source of frustration for us in watching our team play. Though these are veteran players in some cases, so I do have faith that they're going to figure this out and they're going to turn this back around in the other direction. But those things are going to have to happen fairly quickly here.
You know, Mike, you mentioned run prevention. You know, to the credit of your bosses and yourself, you guys have been very aggressive with starting pitching, but not successful, right? When you've spent a lot of money on pitchers. Madison Bumgarner was not good for you. Jordan Montgomery, Eduardo Rodriguez so far. And I mean, it's an injury as opposed to performance, but Corbin Burns now falls into that. As opposed to, say, the Dodgers in your division that could go to the top of the market and then just keep filling in with a $400 million payroll. Will this ultimately make you gun shy in this marketplace and say maybe we just can't in Arizona do it this way? Or do you think there's any commonality here that you would want to talk about?
I don't. I mean, everything you said is accurate. You know, it's been. You know, we haven't necessarily. I mean, Eddie's pitching much better now. Hopefully, that story has not been written. I think some of the things that you've mentioned. You know, there's been injuries that have happened, and that's across the game. I mean, we know we're all dealing with these types of things. I've tried to not get swept up in the emotion of being gun shy and making some of these decisions. I think, you know, they're not all going to turn out bad. We have a good process in place for acquiring these guys. They're very good players. Some of the things like with Jordan Montgomery, we were dealing with no spring training and what led into the season, and that was sort of a quirky thing that happened. And I made that bet, and it didn't really work out that great for either of us. But I don't see, honestly, if you're going to try to consistently compete, how you can walk away from a talent pool source that you need to put on your team. I don't know how you're going to be able to be successful without being in the free agent market, honestly, and in the starting pitching free agent market. And no, I don't envision, as long as I'm doing this, that we're going to be gun shy. I think, yeah, I got to make better decisions as it relates to what the results ultimately might be. But no, I don't know that we're going to shy away from trying to remain aggressive. And yeah, payroll is not an excuse either or a limitation. We have plenty of resources to be able to go out there and put a very good team on the field.
Yeah, I think you're overly accountable on Montgomery. Ken Kendrick told me that was his doing and his fault. Not you, but I guess being the guy in charge of baseball ops, you have to take responsibility for all of it. Let me ask you about Ketel Marte. He's a guy who's one of the best players in the big leagues, and it seems like not as many people know about him as should. What would you say about Marte? And obviously there was an incident in Chicago recently. What were your thoughts about what went on there? It seemed like the team really and the fans rallied around him.
Yeah, that was very disappointing and unfortunate situation for Ketel. And I appreciate the way Tori handled it and his teammates, and how they, in Perdomo specifically, how they rallied behind Ketel. He's an amazing player. He's so dynamic. He does everything on the field. He's such a good offensive player. He's a good defensive second baseman. Look, right now we're without Corbin Carroll and Gabby Moreno, and our offense hasn't really missed a beat. And that's in large credit to the way that Ketel, among others, is playing right now. And he's a superstar in this league, and I agree. I don't think he quite gets the recognition or the credit that he deserves for how good of a player that he is. But we're really lucky that he's on our team.
You mentioned Carroll and Moreno. Carroll was probably going to be top five MVP, for the league when he fractured his wrist. Can you give us maybe an update on those two guys, where they are and when you might get them back? Because again, I assume it's a very fluid, sensitive time of year, and getting those guys back has great value.
Yeah, tremendous value. Love to get them back tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like Corbin might be a little bit in front of Gabby in terms of just the type of like break and where it all sits. And they're back doing some things. I think this is going to be, at least at the outset, I don't know that there's anything that's going to be re-damaged by going out there and playing at some point, but obviously there has to be, from a performance standpoint, the ability to go out there and perform. So there'll be still some time missed. It sounded like both diagnoses were encouraging from a time frame standpoint. I don't have a firm time yet. I think some of this is going to be them getting out into activity and then seeing how they feel and how fast or hard they can push it. It sounds like there may be a to tolerance aspect to this eventually, which is like what, is it, if it's sore, like what is that? Is it limiting? Then we don't want to do that. If it's not limiting and it's just something you have to deal with, can we manage it a different way? So overall, I think we're encouraged by the diagnosis that we got for both guys, but it's they're not going to be here this week, so we're going to still keep going. We'll see what happens around the All-Star break.
We talked about whether you're going to buy or sell. We mostly talked about selling. Your team is still within striking distance. You're not that far out of things right now. I think you're 5 games or something like that out of the wild card. So if you did buy, I mean, and we mentioned some of the pitching buys that haven't worked. Shelby Miller has really worked out nicely for you guys in that bullpen. If you did become a buyer, I don't want to just assume, but I would think you would look at bullpen. Would that be your number one category?
Yeah, that would be the biggest. That would for sure be the biggest area of focus for us. Yeah, I think not having Puck and Martinez in the back end of our bullpen has pushed Shelby. Joel mentioned Jalen Beeks earlier. Like some of these guys that have done a good job for us, they've been pushed into roles that unfortunately we hadn't necessarily anticipated them being in, and they've done a great job with it. So we appreciate how they've performed for sure. I think getting them some help, and we had a couple of young kids that have come up and done a good job, and Ginkel seems to be back on track. So that's very helpful. I do think this bullpen can come together with a couple of moves that we make. We did this a few years ago when we added Sewald, and I think pushing Sewald into the closer role and pushing the guys that were sort of figuring out the very back end for it a little bit, I think it could be a very similar situation for us if we could find someone to help out in the 8th and 9th inning.
You kind of, just as a way to wrap this up, you kind of went to where I wanted to go to wrap it up, which is it always feels like if you need a left fielder, you go get a left fielder and you have a pretty good idea what you're getting. It feels like when you need bullpen, it's so volatile, it's so fungible over the time that it's a difficult, like pin the tail on the donkey kind of thing. Do you find that? And do you have like what's your level of confidence if you got to add two, you're going to add the right two in a process?
This is not a fun part of our job for sure.
Yeah.
Figuring out bullpens and how they work and what the right usage is to keep them at their healthiest and their best. But yet you stay in every game because you can hit. So then you try to win every game, and those are your best guys. So you want to put your best foot forward, but that's just not. You can't do that with a permanent position player club. You run the same position player group out there 7 days in a row if you want to. From a reliever standpoint, there's just such a balance in how all these things come together. It is a very tricky thing for any of us, I think, to really figure out. And someday, like the first 2 weeks of the season, we had one of the best bullpens in the league, and then it all disappeared on us. And it's just the way it goes. And it's just what you have to do. So, yeah, what's your level of confidence? I mean, I think we have a decent process. We acquired Ryan Thompson. We acquired Paul Sewald. We acquired A.J. Puck. All these guys came onto our team at the deadline and carried our bullpen for the remainder of those seasons. So I feel like we've done a pretty good job at acquiring those guys at the deadline. To ask the level of confidence I have on July 31st of how I did, I'll be lying to you if I think we know what level of performance you're gonna get for the next 2 months when you do make those acquisitions.
Mike, well, I'm sure anybody who's listened to this or knows you hears the level of accountability that you bring to this job. And look, John and I have an inside joke that we oftentimes bring people on, and we're doing it because themselves or their teams are going great, and then we are like a jinx. We're like the Sports Illustrated jinx. It goes the other way. Hopefully for you, Mike, we're gonna do the reverse. We're going to bring some good luck to you between now and the deadline, and John and I in our day jobs get to cover you as a buyer. But just because you are going at bedtime, John and I are appreciative of you jumping on with us.
Oh yeah, no problem. I'd also appreciate sacrificing a chicken or something anybody has. That would be very helpful for us.
John and I have a ceremony set up a little later.
Thanks. Mike Elias is doing better since we had him on. So
okay, that's good.
who
That's
came
good.
on and showed courage to come on when things weren't going great, get rewarded.
Yeah.
It's the team guys that are hot, the Lindors and of the world that we've jinxed,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Well,
Oh, the reverse here, Mike. Thanks a
yeah,
lot for
thank you.
joining us on the show.
All right, guys. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Mike.
John and I, of course, thank Mike Hazen for joining us on the show. John, hit or error this
I'm
week?
going to go with an error, an obscure thought of mine here as I think about baseball all the time. I think something needs to be done to help some of those quadruple A type players who keep getting either sent down and brought back or DFA'd and brought back. And Richard, called me Dickie Lovelady, just was DFA'd and now he's back. It's, maybe I'm just too sympathetic toward everybody who's not, Aaron Judge or a great player. Guys that quadruple A player. I just think there's got to be a rule. If you DFA a guy, he's going to have to find another team. To keep bringing back and forth, and I don't blame the Mets. Look at the Dodgers. I mean, they've got guys coming and going all the time. It's a revolving door. It's within the rules. I'm not blaming the team, but I'd like to see MLB do something about it. They did something about the options in terms of who can be optioned down to the minors. Eventually, there's a limit to it. Let's limit this. Last year, we had the guy Tonkin, who I rode with on the subway a couple times back from Yankee Stadium. He was briefly with one of our teams for a second, then he was with the other team. He was back and forth like the whole season. I don't know how somebody lives like that.
Yeah, I think the pitcher Mike Bauman, is that his name, pitched for 5 teams last year. It's
Yeah, I mean, does he get moving expenses? I mean, let's give the guys a break.
I think that's maybe these guys who are on the fringes would rather bounce around and get major league service time and a paycheck than spend the time in the minor leagues. But I hear you. It feels like weird that how the bouncing is done now. It says a lot about the churn in pitching we go through every year. John, I'm going to give it a hit for the life and times of Dave Parker, who passed away at age 74. He'd been battling Parkinson's disease recently. Bless that he heard he was a Hall of Famer before he was gone. He will obviously, now the induction ceremony is later in July, will obviously not be there. And John, I was talking about this when I was on the network today. And you and I are about the same age range. We fell in love with baseball at the same time. He's like one of our last mythic guys because like the games weren't on all the time. You saw the Mets were on WOR, the Yankees were on PIX, but there was a game of the week, and there weren't many 6'5" baseball players in general, and there certainly weren't a lot of 6'5" players who could move like Dave Parker could move. And so, like, the All-Star game isn't what it used to be. And when he won the MVP at the All-Star game in '79, he threw 2 guys out, he drove in a run. It was like he like opened the door like for like imagination stuff. It felt like he could be Lawrence Taylor was playing right field for the Pirates. And what a wonderful career, the '78 NL MVP, great player, and obviously now a Hall of Famer. And may he rest in peace, and his family have peace with what goes forward.
Yeah, I'm glad that the Veterans Committee got it right and put him in the Hall of Fame. He definitely deserved it. You're right, 6'5" guy who was a good. I mean, obviously had big power, but it was a good contact hitter and won a batting title. I mean, obviously we see Aaron Judge do that now, and he may win a batting title this year, but we didn't see that before. When a guy was 6'5", they were usually like Dave Kingman. They weren't hitting 330. The guy was an incredible talent, had a big personality. He was a great guy by all accounts. I'm glad that I was going to say we didn't do it. I'm glad that it was done correctly. I did vote for the guy. I know people were reaching out on Twitter to tell me what an idiot I was, but I voted for him. Yeah, you have to get a certain number of votes, right? You have to get 3/4 of the votes.
Yeah.
And, so he didn't get the 3/4 of the votes. I think that was an oversight, and I'm glad that we have a Veterans Committee and righted that wrong.
Yeah. So yeah, once again, Dave Parker, he was 74. Rest in peace. Tommy Hogan, our producer, thank you so much. This was another week where we moved around when we're doing this. You were flying. We had a lot to do, and Tommy is always gracious and terrific about being able to get this show going and up. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to a podcast, please rate and review us. The New York Post YouTube sports page, give us a view. And as always, please stick with us throughout the season on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.